I used to think that Chicago wasn't at the level. I used to compare Chicago to like New York and LA. And I'd be like, well, New York has the industry, LA has the industry as far as like television, film, or what have you. And so Chicago is hard to compete with those because New York has just the record industry. But then when you see the Bay Area blow up, you see Cleveland blow up, you see Detroit blow up, you see Atlanta blow up, they had the same problem that Chicago has. The problem I think with Chicago is Chicago has a hate mentality. Chicago is a very segregated city, and it's segregated racially, segregated economically, and just people. It's a gang mentality inside of Chicago. So if you're not rolling with my crew, my gang, then I'm not trying to see you get on inside of Chicago, and that's the mentality. And so that transfers over into music. And so if somebody blows up from Chicago, the rest of the world might see them as being a Chicago artist, but people in Chicago see them, he's a South Side artist, he's a West Side artist, he's this artist. And so we cut off things inside of Chicago and create boundaries that the rest of the world doesn't really even see. The city doesn't get behind you. A side of the city or a neighborhood gets behind you inside Chicago, more so inside of New York. If you blow up from New York, sure, they got the Brooklyn Queens thing, but the whole city, like somebody like Biggie, can get the whole city behind him. It's hard for somebody in Chicago to get the whole city behind him. I think that's also why people have, leave Chicago. It's because, Common didn't get love from Chicago until he left. After he left, then he got love. Now he gets love when he comes back to Chicago, but before, when he was in Chicago, he wasn't really getting the love that he deserved to get. And so people fault him for leaving, but those same people weren't giving him love when he was here. The only artist I think that's here and that stayed here and that gets love is probably Twista. Probably the only artist who, and R. Kelly, but it's not really the same genre, who stays here and gets love from the whole city. And even then, he's still a lot of times seen as just a West Side artist, and that's just that Chicago mentality. I think that the effect that Kanye's having on Chicago, he wouldn't have had that same effect if he had stayed in Chicago. First off, because a lot of what Kanye seems to be trying to do is involved. He's doing a lot of music, but I see him kind of moving towards more film. I see a lot of the influence that he has is inside of this film and fashion in the coming years. And I think that he wouldn't be able to have those avenues if he was in Chicago. That's number one. Number two, I think that he sees both sides of it, in the sense that he wants to make sure he puts out people from Chicago, but he wants to make sure that he's in places where he has the access that a LA gives you or that a New York gives you. So he's nurturing the scene in Chicago because the label's putting out people from Chicago and other people are getting on from Chicago by virtue of his success. But he's not limited by Chicago because he's not here. So, and Chicago just has that mentality, whereas if you're here, you can't be doing nothing. I mean, that's just the Chicago mentality. If you were doing something, why would you be here? That's the why haven't you left? So he probably gets more props from Chicago by having left from Chicagoans themselves. It's that second city mentality. He gets more props by having left than he would get if he was still here. I want to see what Rhymefest album does. A lot of people don't really know the influence that he had on some of Kanye's stuff, and a lot of people who know about that don't really understand the roots that he has as an MC. They way before any Kanye stuff. So I want to see what his album does. I want to see how people accept his album and accept him as his own individual artist. I would like to see that. For Chicago, there's a whole, I could name off a bunch of groups that are tight, but the main thing is that Chicago is a lot of groups that are tight don't take the next step and put out records. You know what I'm saying? Like Mass Hysteria is a group that I would love to see with a full album. And see people have to really deal with them as lyricists on a full album, but they got to put the full album out. So that would be one group that I would like to see. Of course, groups that we deal with on the label. The one artist on the label that I'm really interested in the second album is I Mas Murad, though, because his first album was very slept on, and I think that now he has a foundation, and I want to see what his second album, where he takes it on his second album. So I would say Mass Hysteria, I Mas Murad, and Rhymefest. I-Mas is different than any artist in the sense that he can do something that no artist can do. One of the things about J Live that made J Live is that when he rocked the show, he would rhyme and he would DJ at the same time. So he flipped beats and he rhymed at the same time. No one else can really do that. I-Mas plays the drums and rhymes at the same time. There's no one else that can do that, period. And so people who think that hip-hop is not advanced and not innovating, what have you, hip-hop is all about finding something that you can do that no one else can do. And so no one else is doing that, and he's doing that. So when he rocks a show, it's a completely, when he's rocking a show and he's already a tight MC, then he steps behind the drums and he's kicking a freestyle and rocking the drums at the same time, it's just a whole nother level. So I just want to see him be able to get out on tour and people that have to really just deal with that. Like, this cat just really did do this. Like, you know, it's not like, it's like people used to have to deal with Juice as a freestyle artist, Juice from Chicago. People would hear about how good he was at freestyling, but until you saw him freestyling, you didn't really know. And then you're like, no, he really is that good. People probably hear about IMIs, but until you see him actually kick a freestyle and rock the drums, you really don't know. So I want to see him be able to get out on the road and take that, and have people have to, you know, just deal with that.